Good afternoon, everybody, and a very warm welcome to Family Rights Group webinar on lifelong links. I'm Angela Fraser-Wicks, Chair of Trustees and founding member of the Parents Panel, which is one of their expert panels made up of people with lived experience of the child welfare and family justice system, and I will be your chair for today. I'm also a member of the Expert by Experience board of the Independent Care Review that published its long-awaited report earlier today. For those of you who may not as yet have had a chance to read the report, as it is quite a long report, one of its recommendations is that, and I quote, all local authorities should have family finding support equivalent to or exceeding the work of Lifelong Links in place by 2024 at the latest. Hopefully, by the end of today's webinar, you will all not only understand how Lifelong Links works, why it's so important that local authorities implement Lifelong Links, have listened to the data that shows how successful Lifelong Links is, but will also agree with us that there is nothing that exceeds Lifelong Links. I'm delighted that so many of you have been able to join us today. You will hear from a local authority about their experience of implementing Lifelong Links, hear from an incredible young woman and her coordinator about how Lifelong Links transformed her life, and hear the results of the evaluation of 3 years of data collected about the programme. We have a very tight agenda, so I shall be strict in keeping to time. Please do use the chat function to ask questions, leave feedback, introduce yourselves, let us know where in the country or indeed even the world, if that's relevant, you are, because we'd love to know. Whilst we won't be able to respond to everything that we pick up in the chat live, we will do our best to address the main themes that are arising throughout the day. So without further ado, I'm now going to show you a short film that gives you a bit of insight into Lifelong Links.
Today, there are more than 100,000 children and young people in the UK care system. For many, this means moving away from their schools, their communities, their relatives and friends, leading to feelings of isolation. At Family Rights Group, we're trying to change this. Through our Lifelong Links programme, we're working with local authorities to help children and young people in care find or rebuild relationships with relatives and other significant individuals in their lives. Our goal is to ensure that they have a positive support network to rely on throughout their childhood and beyond. The Lifelong Links model has been co-created with children in care in order to get the best outcome for every young person involved. We support local authorities to safely implement Lifelong Links by training staff to become coordinators, publishing guidance, and providing consultancy support. Once trained, a coordinator works with a child to find the people most important to them. With the child and their social workers agreement, the coordinator brings all these people together at a family group conference. Here, the child, their family and friends make a long-term plan for how the child's relationships can continue to grow. Since 2017, more than 1,000 children and young people have participated in Lifelong Links, and we're seeing real impact. Local authorities report that it's resulting in the young people increasing their support networks significantly. The University of Oxford has found that almost 3/4 of children are still in the same foster care or children's home a year later, compared to 41% of those who haven't accessed Lifelong Links. And almost 80% of the children and young people taking part feel an improved sense of identity after finding out more about their family roots. The benefits of Lifelong Links to children and young people are not something that you can put a price on. However, an analysis of the programme did show it has a cost benefit. Our aim is that every child in care is offered Lifelong Links. Help make a difference to young people's lives by finding out how you can introduce Lifelong Links in your area.
Thank you very much for that. I'm now going to hand you over to Cathy Ashley, our Chief Exec, who's going to talk a little bit more about Lifelong Links.
For those of you who are new to Family Rights Group, we are a national charity that promotes policies and practices that keep children safe within their family and strengthen the family and community networks of those children who can't live at home. We provide specialist child welfare practice and legally based advice and advocacy to parents whose children are in need, deemed at risk, or are in the care system. and wider family and friends who are raising children who can't remain with their parents. We will advise 7,000 families this year, but demand for the service is significantly greater. Our website and parents and kinship care advice forums are also a valuable resource for families and for practitioners. Our parents and kinship care panels are flourishing, and panel members do a brilliant job in championing the importance of government and public services, listening and co-producing policies and service with families. We led the introduction of family group conferences to the UK in the 1990s and run the National Family Group Conference and Lifelong Links Network and accreditation standards for family group conference services. And we very much welcome the Independent Care Review's recommendation today that families should have a new legal entitlement to family group decision making. And we developed the Lifelong Links approach, which works to build lasting relationships for children in care. As the film succinctly describes, too often the care system breaks rather than builds relationships for children in care. Family Rights Group therefore wanted to turn that on its head. And that's where Lifelong Links comes in. Why? Because as the pandemic has highlighted, we all need people to turn to in our lives for emotional and practical support, and children and young people in care are no different. Today's review has published references to numerous studies that highlight the importance of relationships to children and adults' mental health, resilience, well-being. The need for positive relationships to turn to doesn't stop for a child at 18, yet too often children leaving care are left alone and isolated. The professional support network falls away, and we're all too aware of the adverse consequences for many young people. A recent report found Scottish children in care have much higher mortality rates, for example, rates of depression and admission to psychiatric inpatient units than the rest of the population. Of course, some children in care do thrive, but it's too often not because of the way that the system operates. Moreover, social media advances mean that young people in care can and often will secretly explore contact family members in an unsupported way. Today's review rightly aspires to make lifelong loving relationships the obsession of the care system. We couldn't have put that better ourselves. So the design and aim of Lifelong Links, and it was co-designed with stakeholders, including young people in care and care leavers, is to create a lifelong support network for children and young people in the care system. The model itself includes a child or young person being referred. If they're over 18, that could be in self-referral, but normally it's a social worker who makes a referral, and then there's a planning meeting at which there's consideration about that child or young person's needs, the potential risks, and who will provide the child with support, because it is undoubtedly a very emotional journey, or can be. An independent Lifelong Links coordinator trained by Family Rights Group works with the child to find out who's important to them, who they would like to be back in touch with, and who they would like to know. This can include former teachers and foster carers. One child described his grandparent, who he wanted to find as Granny Ice Cream. Lifelong Links only happens at the child's pace and with their agreement, and that is central. The coordinator then searches for these people using a variety of tools and techniques. Some of these have been designed specifically as part of Lifelong Links, such as the online social connections tool, and others have been adapted, such as mobility mapping and genograms. And a key part of the process is that the child is offered a Lifelong Links family group conference. The network is brought together to celebrate the child, young person, and take the lead in making a plan with and for the child, which the local authority supports to ensure these relationships continue to grow. The plan then must be embedded in the child's care plan and pathway plan and supported. The history of Lifelong Links is that it was trialled after a development stage for 3 years in England. There is an ongoing trial in Scotland. The trial in England involved 13 local authorities, and at that stage the trial criteria was children aged under 16 years old in care for less than 3 years. And the reason for that rationale was, well, why wait? Since 2020, there's been no restriction to which children can be referred for lifelong links. Alongside the Lifelong Links toolkit that we've co-designed, we've also developed Lifelong Links guidance and working with young people aged 16 and over, including care leavers. We're determined that no child in care is excluded from being offered lifelong links. We produce guidance for lifelong links services on supporting unaccompanied asylum-seeking children and on working with non-verbal children. And we're co-developing guidance on working with adopted children who've returned to care, on children returning home from care, and children in residential settings. Alongside providing Lifelong Links training consultancy, we run regular online Lifelong Links managers meetings and regular practice learning sets for coordinators. To date, more than 1,700 children and young people have or are benefiting from Lifelong Links, and the youngest is just 2 years old. Lifelong Links is being implemented in 27 English local authorities, 7 in Scotland and 2 in Wales. If your authority or organisation is interested in introducing and implementing Lifelong Links, please do get in touch with us, and we'll have more details later in this webinar. Thank you.
Thank you, Patty. I've been just keeping an eye on the chat then. It's brilliant to see that I've not spotted anyone outside of the UK yet, but we do have people here that are from all over the UK. So thank you so much for taking the time out of your busy days to come and join us. Now, our next speaker, actually, without belittling anybody else that's about to speak today, is, I believe, our most important one, because we can tell you the data, we can tell you how wonderful Lifelong Links is, but nothing ever compares to listening to the voice of someone who has direct lived experience of that. So I'm now going to hand you over to Salma, a young woman who has experience of Lifelong Links, who's going to talk to us a little bit about it. So it's over to you, Salma.
Hi everyone, good afternoon. Well, thank you for having me and for listening to me today. I've been in care since I was 7, and all I can say is that it's been a crazy journey since since I was a young kid. But there was always a thought at the back of my head about where I originally came from and who my family were, and obviously there were points being made about how the pandemic has obviously affected us as young kids. And all I can say is during the pandemic, seeing my foster parents around me with their kids just made me realize that I kind of miss that aspect in which I want the same thing, but with my own family, where I can make memories with them and eventually grow up with my own blood and make memories with them and always have that strong support system that they had. And during the pandemic, I was by myself. I was just honestly just wondering about what my life has in the future, if I'm actually going to go meet my family. That's always been a question at the back of my head, is whether I'm going to meet my family or not. And eventually that thought kind of did put me into some sort of depression where I just didn't want to do any of my schoolwork. I remember my birthday was coming up. I just didn't want to celebrate it because I didn't think, what was the point of celebrating something that I can't really remember for the rest of my life with my family with. And once Lifelong Links came into my life when I was 18, it kind of changed my perspective on life a lot more. It gave me a lot more confidence in my education and in my future path. You get what I mean? And Nargis, who's been working with me on the behalf of Lifelong Links, has been with me throughout the whole journey, and she's honestly made me feel a lot more comfortable, and she's made me feel a lot secure. And when she came into my life, I really didn't think that anything was going to happen, because I've always had my social workers in the past tell me that I would always see my family, and I think it was quite unfair because with them saying that, I've always expected to eventually see my family. Like every year I would always think, okay, cool, this is the year that I'm going to meet my family, this is the year that's going to happen. And every year it was the same promises, and this has been happening for like 10 years of my life, well, before lifelong links came into my life. And when Nargis came in, she sat me down and I looked at her and I was like, okay, I've heard this like 10 times, I can already like tell you what you're going to tell me, like I know what the steps are. But then she just kept, you know, like talking to me, and she kept trying with me, even like when she, you know, kept messaging me about what I wanted to do, how I wanted to like you know, carry on with the lifelong links.
I know you said that you were you'd been left managing these expectations for all that length of time and struggling. What did Nargis do that was different to what the other social workers had done? How did she sort of help you realize, actually, this might be the moment that things are going to change?
I think from the first day that we met, I've always obviously I've said that I've had a lot of promises being made in the past which weren't fulfilled. So when Nargis came in, I was just expecting there to be no outcome. So from the first day I was a bit hesitant, but she kept trying to communicate with me. She kept, you know, pushing me to actually like go with the like process, and she kept like telling me step by step of how it was going to happen. And I don't think I've ever had that before, where someone directly told me this is what's going to happen from start to finish. And this is like, I think another thing that she did that really helped me was she always like kept me up to date about everything that was going on. So if there was something that she just discovered, she would always like give me a text, and you know, I would never respond back, but you know, like she still kept trying and texting me and stuff like that. So it kind of gave me a bit of reassurance. And after I realized that, you know, this amazing amazing woman, sorry, wouldn't give up on me, I realized that I've literally trusted her with everything, and she gained a lot of my trust within the few like weeks of us meeting. And you know, when we went to, I don't know if you guys want to hear about the time when I actually met my
Yes,
family.
I think we want to hear about everything,
Yeah.
Salma. Anything you're happy to share, we're happy to listen to.
So I received a call from Nargis one day. I was really stressed about schoolwork, and I remember always like messaging her being like, I don't know if I can do the whole university thing, because there's always the like, you know, the question of my family at the back of my head. And then this one day she like called me and she goes, oh, like, do you want to pack? And I was like, pack for what? She goes, we're going to Bangladesh. And I was like, really? And then we ended up making plans to go to Bangladesh in like December, which last year. And we went there, and honestly, that kind of changed my whole life. And I don't think I've ever smiled the way I've smiled like nowadays. I don't think I wake up every day with a great mood. Like I haven't really like woken up with a smile on my face like this before. But nowadays, like I just think that my life's fulfilled with finding my family and everything. I remember when I went to Bangladesh, Naj was there with me, and at first when I saw like my house in Bangladesh, I was a bit like shocked and overwhelmed. But then seeing my family in flesh and seeing my mom specifically was so shocking, because so that was a little picture of me and my mom. But when I first saw her, I think it was like the most amazing thing in the world, because I've always dreamt of this moment, and I've always like wanted it to kind of come true at some point, and it did. And seeing everyone made me feel so like happy. Like I don't know, it's like a different kind of excitement when you see your own blood and, you know, flesh in front of you. And it was amazing to go see my family and hug them, and you know, like have them speak about the memories that they had of me from when I was younger. And it kind of built up like a big, well, what I can say is my life was a big puzzle piece before I went to Bangladesh, and going there kind of put all the pieces together, and I kind of know who I am now, and I'm a lot more confident at who I am, because I don't have to keep guessing about where I've come from. Like going back to Bangladesh has, you know, like put up this whole thing of like who I am, where I was raised, who my family are. And honestly, what I can say is like going there has built up my confidence, and it's built up like, you know, an amazing like mindset for me where I want to keep doing better things every single day for them, because now I realize that, you know, there are people that love me, and there are people that have a lot of like hope like for the future in me. And like I don't know, it's just amazing. And to see that, you know, they haven't forgotten about me, and to, you know, think that they've always like, you know, thought about me every single day just kind of made me cry, because it was like for 10 years of my life there are moments where I completely forgot about my family, and for them to always remember me every single day just by like small things that remind me of them, like of little kids running around, and they'll tell me, oh, that's what you used to do when you were younger, and you kept like running around to the different like, you know, houses asking for your favorite food and stuff like that. That kind of like made me realize that although like I thought that I didn't have my family the whole time, like in their heads they always like had me, like, you know, in their minds. And it was really sweet going there. And it was shocking to go to Bangladesh. Like it still shocks me to this day that I've met them, and now like we speak on a regular basis, and we always like talk about random things, like even though that we can't speak the same language, we use like Google Translate to talk to each other. And you know, like hopefully in the future I plan to go back there and spend a little bit more time with my family. But yeah,
I think
I'm
that's
just
wonderful. I think what I've taken from that is you got answers to all of those questions that you had that were floating around in your head at a time when you were developing into the young woman that you are, and then that can be quite difficult for you. So you suddenly were able to get your identity and to understand that. And I think the thing I take from this is obviously that Nargis is phenomenal coordinator, and to manage a language barrier and family on a different continent. But I think what it shows is the power of lifelong links, that it can stretch to the other side of the world. And actually, before you finish, Salma, if you could say to any of the local authorities listening, or to any young people who are thinking about doing lifelong links, you know, what would you would say to them about lifelong links?
what I can say is like just do it. Like honestly, like having this experience with lifelong links has changed my life drastically. Like I think a lot of young kids, I think we suffer a lot. So to have this opportunity where we can have a breather from all the questions about our identity and stuff like that, like I think it's an amazing opportunity to have, like especially when you know that there's a life out there for you that you don't even know about, and to have it with you like written out and explained to you like face to face, it's just amazing. And honestly, I can't thank like lifelong links enough. Like I praise you guys every single day, but you guys have honestly been so like supportive. And I think with me it was just so like different having people that no matter like what you say, or no matter how many times you give up, like they never give up on you. So, you know, thank you so much for like, you know, giving me this opportunity, and, you know, giving me the chance to, you know, bring Salma. Like, yeah, I know Salma better now.
Can
But
I
yeah.
just ask you one question? You talked about family in Bangladesh, but you've also met family in the UK, and how they've been your support, but alternatively, you're being their support. There's something that you wanted to share that jig
Yeah.
your memory a little bit. Do you want to share
Yeah.
that with the group?
Yeah, so obviously there's a lot of like stuff that experiences I've had in Bangladesh, but coming back here and also being able to see my like relatives in England is, well, London specifically, is amazing, because every single time I go to my family members now, I'll always have my like younger nieces come up to me and ask me questions about like what I'm doing with my life. And whenever there's like an issue that they have, or like, you know, relationship issues, or like stuff that they can't really necessarily talk to their parents about, they always call me and they're like, oh, what do I do? Like they always say auntie Salma, and I'm like, it feels weird to be called like an aunt or like a sister, but I'm getting there eventually. But it's nice, like, have your nieces call you up, be like, oh, like, if my parents are going to kill me for this, but like, can you help me, because I know I can trust you. And like, I think I am the second person out of my family to go to university, and now my younger nephews and cousins and nieces, they're all like kind of want to do the same thing that I do, because I've kind of taught them, okay, like having like a good education and career also like builds your like confidence, builds your strength, and there's a lot of opportunities with education, because I take it seriously, because when I was younger, that's the only thing that I had, and that's the only thing that was there constantly throughout my life. So now speaking to them about their education and stuff like that, they're also like inspired to go into universities. And I have a couple of my cousins that are going into their first year. I think one is planning to join the same university as me, but yeah, it's weird, but yeah.
So some brilliant stuff. I know you're doing a lot of support and they're supporting you as well, but what would you say to all these professionals? Would you encourage lifelong link referrals to help young people? Yeah,
100%. Like,
yeah,
I feel like if you really do want to make a change in someone's life, I think this is the biggest leap that you can take. And I feel like a lot of us as young kids struggle with our identities, and obviously, like, I don't think I've had any other organization like help me this much as lifelong links. And yeah, I think take the opportunity. Like, if you're really trying to help a young person out, this is the biggest opportunity that they will have in their life, and you need to take it. You do need to take it.
Thank you so much, Salma and Nargis. I'm sorry, we're running out of time. We could sit and listen to you all day, but to hear you have gone from feeling like you had nowhere to belong to being part of your family and then becoming a role model within that family, I think is phenomenal. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us today. And it's just a shame that another company seems to have already chosen the Just Do It brand, because I think that seems to be the common theme that's coming out of today. So thank you both very much. I'm now going to hand you over to a practitioner from Hertfordshire who's going to talk about the impact that it's had on her practice within their local authority. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Angela. And it's great to hear the impact that Lifelong Links had, just as we have listened to a minute ago. My name is Tendai Mroy. I'm Head of Quality Assurance and Practice in Hertfordshire. So I'm just going to talk really briefly about our own journey in implementing Lifelong Links since 2016, when we first heard about it. So at that time, we had just introduced a new practice framework, family safeguarding, and we were talking a lot about relationships and relationship-based practice. We wanted our social workers and our practitioners to be really mindful of what young people needed and what families needed in terms of the relationships just across the board, whether with themselves or with others. And then one of the things we were beginning to notice and realize was how much our young people were really gravitating back home and really looking for that connection with their family, but in an unplanned way. So sometimes young people would go missing, and usually found within their birth family or extended family network, and that made us really realize how important that was. And some of the things that we were thinking about at the time was also how important it was for young people to feel settled and to feel that they belong and they have a sense of identity. And one of the things that brought that really to mind was one of our young people who became a parent herself and didn't have the support to be able to look after her child, and she ended up in the child protection system again. And it became really clear to us that as corporate parents, we were really ill-equipped to provide the support that extended family or having a relationship outside of the local authority would have given that young person had they been supported. So when Family Rights Group told us about lifelong links, and that it wasn't called lifelong links at the time, that they had found this approach, and we were really keen to be involved in testing it out to see how it might work for our young people. We talked to our young people in Hertfordshire and our parents, and there was real enthusiasm straight away. You know, our DCS, our members, everybody really could see the point. They could see the importance of young people developing those relationships, having those supports. You know, we had professionals in Hertfordshire and you know, social workers and midwives and others who had been keen to develop relationships with young people in our care, and who were looking for support, but were constrained by the practice wisdom at the time about, you know, and the fear that they might be growing, you know, that having those relationships is not appropriate. And it was really interesting that we had this need, and then we had people who also wanted to develop those relationships. So we did a lot of work with Family Rights Group and others, and also within our local authority to see whether this was something that we could really put in place for young people. And straight away that seemed really possible. There was lots of enthusiasm. So we developed Lifelong Links really by talking to young people within our authority. So it's really important when you're implementing Lifelong Links to think about what works with it locally and how it fits locally, so that the implementation becomes successful. But sometimes if you haven't thought about that really carefully, then that can create problems. So our young people groups co-designed how it fit within how we worked. We actually didn't have a parents panel, or, you know, we had no mechanism for consulting parents prior to that. And when we started Lifelong Links, we then had support to invite and start a parents panel. So that group helped us to co-design how it would look for us and how it would work with us. We also at that time had a steering group which included foster carers, parents, senior members of our departments, you know, young people, and that steering group was really important in helping us to keep on track with the implementation, and to make sure that we are doing it while keeping the best interests of children and young people in mind. So our young people were really important there. We also had a practice development group which helped with some of the development of practice, because there were many dilemmas that practitioners faced. The practice wisdom at the time was, you know, if young people are in our care, they should not have so much you know, contact, because it affects the relationships that they have in foster care and others. And it was so important for such practice wisdom to be challenged, because relationships, as we've discovered, are actually what young people need in order to feel settled. So, you know, it's actually the opposite. So those sort of things where, you know, the practice development group was really key in challenging some of that practice wisdom, you know, the fear that our practitioners had about the possibility young people will gravitate to people who are likely to harm them. And we put in place, you know, how do we make sure that that doesn't happen, and how do we reassure ourselves that it's safe? So it was really a lot of really good partnership work. But what was probably most effective was being able to think outside of, this is a project, Lifelong Links, and it's something that we do in isolation. It was to think about the objectives behind it, which is about helping young people to build those relationships, to never lose those relationships, and to really think about our practice from beginning to end, and think about, you know, how do we make sure young people have those relationships from the moment, and don't lose those relationships from the moment we first get involved, all the way through. And that has really transformed our practice. We have thought about, you know, the involvement of family and extended family right from when we assess how we can help families. We also put in place, a real requirement for there to be a look at who is involved in young people's lives and families' lives right at the beginning. So making sure there's a genogram done, and that families are invited, and extended family are invited to early meetings, including child protection conferences, and that family plans are being made right at the beginning. It was all practice wisdom that came out of us realizing what an impact lifelong links had on young people and was having on young people. One of the things we also realized for our young people who we look after was that for those that were involved in lifelong links, foster carers and birth family developed such relationships so that it gave a seamlessness to how a young person was living their life while in our care. So it wasn't like, family was something else and the foster placement was something else. It was almost like a continuum, and when the foster carer was able, because they meet at the family group conference, they were able to develop those relationships and talk to the birth family. And when a young person goes missing, the family would ring the foster carer and say, he's over here or she's over here, which is really helpful. And we had one really good example of a young person who was going missing, and it emerged that the reason they were going missing was they are worried about their mom and their sister. And when that that relationship was established as part of lifelong links between the adults, the foster carer and the mom. So it became not just the young person's burden to worry about mom, but the foster carer was able to ring mom and say, how are you doing? Because young man is worried. And that just gave such stability and seamlessness to that. So that was really really important. And we, the way we have used, the wisdom is also around placement stability anyway. And now it is a requirement for all our practitioners to continue to work with birth families after a young person comes into our care. Previously, we have finished court and we're done with that, and our young person is now in our care. But now we require that our social workers continue and practitioners continue to work with the birth family during the time that the young person is in our care, just to continue that work and those relationships and to build those connections. So in many ways, and in Lifelong Links has transformed how we do our practice right across the board. And of course, I would recommend it to any local authority. And I would say, if you want to do it properly, to implement it, you've got to do it really properly and make sure that it's not a project, which is something that you just do in isolation, but a way of, part of your values and part of how you think and feel about young people, and part of seriously thinking about how effectively you can be a corporate parent to children and young people by making sure that they've got those links and there isn't a them and us in terms of the birth or extended family, but it's all part of a young person's network, warts and all. And it's really important that a young person just feels that seamlessness of relationship. Thank you.
Thank you, Tendai, and perfectly on time. That was wonderful. Thank you. And I think the themes I took from that are things that I've taken throughout the day, which is about strengthening those relationships and the importance of family. And I was delighted to hear, that even when the child is in care, that you're still working with the birth family, because everybody's circumstances change, and really understanding who's there for that child and why it's important to build that relationship. So thank you, Tendai. I'm now going to hand you over to Lisa, who is going to present the evaluation findings. Thanks, Lisa.
So thanks, Angela. I'm just going to share my screen with you all. So you should now be able to see that. She says, okay.
Yes, we're good to go.
There you go. Okay, so I'm Professor Lisa Holmes, and I have had the pleasure of leading the evaluation of Lifelong Links in England from the outset. And in the time I've got available today, I'm just going to give you a few headlines. And if you do want to find out more about the evaluation, then I have included links to both of the reports at the end of this presentation. So in terms of the start of our evaluation, we were part of the Department for Education Innovation Programme, and the evaluation, which ran from April 2017 till March 2020, highlighted just a few of the positive outcomes associated with lifelong links. And even at that point in time had indicated that lifelong links had impacted positively on the lives of children in care. And obviously we've heard from Salma and Tendai today some really compelling evidence, and now we're taking this to the evidence from the 12 local authorities that participated in that evaluation, which highlighted about the contribution of lifelong links to improving young people's sense of identity and belonging and building those narratives. And as Tendai's already said, it's about sort of preventing these disconnections between the lives of children and young people in care, during care, and prior to coming into care. The evaluation also highlighted some of the restorative aspects of lifelong links, particularly in terms of restoring relationships with previous foster carers as well as with birth family. One of the highlights from the DFE evaluation was around placement stability. And again, at the outset of lifelong links in some of the local authorities, there was a little bit of reticence from professionals and from foster carers for whom lifelong links was entirely new, in terms of the concerns that essentially lifelong links might lead to increased instability as young people started to extend their network and learn more about their birth families. But actually, as Tendai's already said, what we saw across the board, not only in Hertfordshire, was foster carers and birth family members working together alongside the children in care. And as such, what we found with the 3-year DFE evaluation was that for the young people who were referred to lifelong links, their placement stability 1 year after lifelong links was actually better than for the comparator group. And I'm going to come back to this a little bit in a moment. So as I say, I'm not going to go through all of the detail today, but what I am going to focus on is, sorry, my slides have stuck. There we go. Sorry. So I'm going to focus on what we've been doing since March 2020, which essentially has been working with Family Rights Group and 4 local authorities to consider the ways in which lifelong links has become embedded in practice. What we have been doing there specifically is looking at the ways in which lifelong links has been integrated into care plans, and whether there's any evidence of culture change within the local authorities that are continuing with lifelong links. We've also been looking at whether there's any evidence of longer term outcomes, again, returning to placement stability and some other longer term outcomes for children and young people associated with lifelong links. So what we've been doing as part of this evaluation extension is we've been looking at practice summaries, which are completed for young people by their lifelong links coordinator, very much in partnership with young people from 4 local authorities. We've done a series of semi-structured interviews in that same 4 local authorities, again, looking at the ways in which lifelong links has become embedded. And we've also included that longitudinal child level quantitative analysis in 2 of those 4 local authorities, which has meant that we have followed the pathways of 164 young people who we now have up to 4 years worth of data. So in terms of some of the headlines in the next 5 minutes is really sort of looking at how lifelong links can be integrated into wider practice. And already Tendai has highlighted this as a key point about lifelong links not being seen as a project or a program, but the importance of lifelong links being integrated into practice within children's social care. It's about understanding how it fits with other work and other practice. And for the evaluation extension, a core component of that was about understanding the relationship and the interplay between lifelong links and life story work. The evaluation extension also highlighted the rights of the child and actually thinking about, is this something that should be available for all, should be available for all children in care? I'm really thinking about how the whole process should be led by the needs and wishes of young people. So moving on, and the whole concept of placement stability. So as I've already highlighted, our quantitative analysis from the DFE evaluation, which ran for that 3 years, highlighted placement stability and continuation of stability for the children and young people who had been referred to lifelong links. But actually both that evaluation and our continued activities looking at how practice is embedded have really focused on the concept of relational stability and how lifelong links transcends this understanding of just thinking about placement stability and understanding the importance of relationships for young people that go beyond placement start and end dates. The findings have also highlighted how lifelong links can establish and re-establish connections without contact. So again, for some of the young people, it may not be possible for them to have in-person contact with certain family members, but lifelong links has facilitated a connection. It's helped young people to understand more about their birth family, about their background and those relationships and some of the decisions that were made earlier on as part of their process of them becoming looked after. So thinking about our longitudinal analysis of placement stability, and as I say, really important for us to think about relational stability, but the harsh reality is that when we're looking at the statistics and the data for children in care, very often we will focus on administrative data and that specific data item which looks at placement stability. And what we can show here is that for those children and young people, so the 164 where we now have data for up to 3 years beyond lifelong links, the placement stability is continuing to improve. So the average number of placement changes that the young people are experiencing continues to reduce. And we would hope to see this pattern continue into the future. One of the other outcome indicators that we had planned to look at as part of the DFE evaluation was how lifelong links supports well-being. And certainly in that evaluation and our subsequent analysis, we have data that indicates an improved sense of identity and belonging for the children and young people who receive lifelong links. What we've also been able to do as part of the evaluation extension is to measure well-being as it's captured in the strengths and difficulties questionnaire. So again, for a slightly smaller group of 152 children and young people, we've had data for more than 4 years where we can look at their SDQ scores year on year from prior to lifelong links, during lifelong links, and then as their lifelong links plan gets embedded into practice, and up to 3 years after lifelong links commenced. And what you can see here on the graph is that the mean SDQ scores reduce year on year. And so for those of you that are not familiar with an SDQ score, a higher score is associated with poor emotional health and well-being. And so at the start of this graph here, you can see that the mean SDQ for this group of 152 young people was close to what's classified as an abnormal range, close to 17. And that by the time we reach 3 years post lifelong links for this same group of young people, that mean SDQ score is much closer to 12. So that's sort of one of our headlines in terms of well-being. So in my last minute, I just wanted to highlight some of our messages for policy and practice. This is not an exhaustive list, it's just a few of the points I wanted to highlight today. I've already talked about relational stability rather than placement stability, and I think it's a really important concept that lifelong links makes us all stop and think about. The importance of lifelong links being driven and operationalized by the child. So again, the pace at which lifelong links happens, the way in which it manifests itself must be informed by the children and young people. Lifelong links also needs to be considered as ongoing. It's not something that stops. It's something that starts and then becomes embedded. And that's a really important distinction. We've also identified both through the evaluation extension and the main DFE evaluation, the importance of the coordinator and the separation of lifelong links as being operationalized as a necessary conceptual disconnect for family members from the original social work teams involved in the initial decisions. And lastly, just to highlight the importance of training and support being provided to foster carers and key workers working in children's homes to understand on how they work best with family members. And I'm going to stop there so we stay on time. And as I say, here are the links for both the DFE evaluation report, the embedding practice report, and my email. So if you have any further questions that we're not going to have a chance to cover today, please do send me an email. Thank you.
Fabulous. Thank you, Lisa, and thank you for getting us back on track time-wise. That really is much appreciated. We've now got a small amount of time at the end to take some questions. The first question that came through was something that came through earlier on, which was asking, are we going to be sharing this recording? And having checked with the speakers today that, yes, we will be sharing the recording. And I'm guessing that's probably going to go on our website. So, watch out for it and do keep checking our website. The second question that's come in around, I'm going to go across to Kathy for, which was around Lifelong Links tools and the use of words and pictures. If you could give us a bit of an overview on that.
Hi, yes, so all different communication routes are used in order to enable the child to be able to express who they want to be in touch with, who may be in their family. So that includes mobility mapping, which arose out of the, in fact, Rwandan genocide, and it was developed by the development agencies as a way of helping children reconnect with their family, and that involves drawing and other visual means. There's the social connection tool, which is very much about a sort of prompted conversation with the child. But that doesn't necessarily, some children are non-verbal, some find it hard to communicate their views verbally. And there's lots of different ways that we manage to use in order to enable the coordinator to be able to find family for the child, or who's including genograms and eco maps and looking at the child's care files and talking to family members in order for them to identify others. So that just gives it a bit of a taster, really.
Thank you, Kathy. And this one I'm going to come across to Tendai for, if that's okay with you, Tendai. And it's what systems are in place to prevent unhelpful or damaging connections? Because we've heard a lot about the positive ones.
Yeah, I think one of the more things that do help with that is the partnership work between the coordinator doing the searching and the child's social worker and professional network. And that knowledge and understanding about the history. So if the social worker does know individuals that are dangerous for the child, then that's very clear straight away. But also we do, before there is contact, the social worker and the coordinator can facilitate a police check of individuals. But I think some of the things that do help is to make sure that there is due care in making those connections, whether that's by accompanying the young person during that relationship building, or even the fact that everybody comes together at a family group conference. So at the Lifelong Links meeting does mean that you have the wisdom from the family as well as to who is not safe for the young person to create relationships with. So if you don't make those decisions, or you don't blindly just go in and expose young people to all sorts, there is those checks and balances to make sure that they are helpful relationships.
Thank you, Tendai. Kathy, did you want to add a little something in the end of that?
Yeah, just very briefly. Firstly, you've got the initial planning meeting, and part of that consideration is thinking through where may there be concerns in relation to potential reconnections or connections that child has. I think the other thing is that what Lifelong Links does is it basically supports the child in order to be able to actually understand where some of those connections may be unsafe. So what we find, or what we're finding, is that children were often doing it secretly, do it surreptitiously because they thought they had to, and in doing so they could put themselves more at risk of rejection or worse. Whereas actually what Lifelong Links does is hold the child, but does it in a safe way so they know who to avoid as well as who they can rely on.
Thank you, Kathy. I'm going to come over to you, Lisa, again. I've got a couple of questions. I'm just going to ask you them both, and then you can sort of follow one on from the other to save time. The first question was around, does the positive change in placement stability come from any selection bias that may exist in referrals to Lifelong Links? And the second one was, do we have research about outcomes for care leavers post-18 around education, work, independence, as opposed to just placement stability?
Yeah, thanks, Angela. So in terms of the first question, there was some selection bias in the main DFE evaluation, which ran for the 3 years. But actually in our quantitative analysis, one of the variables that we matched for and controlled for was previous placement stability prior to Lifelong Links. So if you want to have a look, the way in which we matched the Lifelong Links group and the comparator group to look at selection bias and how we tried to control for that is in Appendix 5 of the main evaluation report from DFE. So if you want to go away and have a look at that, you can have a look for more detail. In terms of the outcomes for care leavers, no, we didn't have any data on this. So again, it was something that we were going to look at as part of the evaluation extension. But actually the numbers of young people aged 15 and 16 who had reached a point where we would want to look at those outcomes post 18, the numbers are still tiny. So again, I mean, this is something for the future. But again, if we think about the data that local authorities like Hertfordshire and other local authorities that have been involved in Lifelong Links from the outset, there's certainly no reason why that data wouldn't become available as more of the young people reach the age of 18, and then we would start to understand more beyond 18.
Excellent. Thanks very much indeed, Lisa. I'm not sure if we have time for one last question. I've been told we've got time for Kathy to step in just for a quick moment. And the question is, excuse me while I find it again, regarding a Lifelong Links coordinator involvement, is this a set time frame and can it be supported once that time frame has elapsed? Kathy.
So one of the things that's harder for organisations to manage, but is absolutely essential as part of the Lifelong Links approach, is that it goes at the pace of the child and the coordinator. And therefore, the answer is no, there isn't a set time frame. Obviously, we've got some data on how long on average the coordinator tends to be involved with the child over, because so many children now have participate in Lifelong Links, but critically, this is a child-led approach and it's not a performance constrained approach in that sense. So yeah, the coordinator will be involved as long as the child needs them to be.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Kathy. Oh, sorry. That we're almost out of time now, but what I would like to say is anybody who has any more questions or would like any more information on Lifelong Links, and hopefully information on how you can get involved and set up Lifelong Links within your local authority, the contact within Family Rights Group is Jordine. I'm hoping that she's going to put her email address into the chat. We're now at the end of today's webinar. As I said, if you'd like any more information, please do get in contact with us. Thank you all very much for coming and enjoy the rest of your day.